Call this April 2nd meeting of the Strongsville Board of Education to order. Deb, could you, excuse me, Amy, could you take roll?
Yes. Mr. Evans?
Here.
Mr. Grozan? Mrs. Ludwig? Here. Mr. Micko?
Here.
Mr. Naso?
Here. Stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Brings us to district goals. We always mention that our two goals are, one, financial prudence, and two, student achievement. Actually, student achievement and financial prudence. I just want to talk, there's some things that we've done, decisions that we make. We always have to balance the two, right? So if we lean too heavily on student achievement, we can overspend what we have available. If we're too scaled back and everything is about saving and everything's about cutting and everything, then it harms the other. So there's always a balance between those two goals and it's our job to strike the right balance, and the administration's job to strike the right balance. So I just wanted that there's always that balance that we're working towards, and we have to stay within that. So thank you. We don't have any public comments tonight. That brings us to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Naso. This evening, our first report is in regard to full day and half-day kindergarten registration to this point. Board members, I have given you a packet in regard to our full day and half-day registration and enrollment at this point. Right now, we have registered 98 half-day students, which realistically is about 70 to 80% of the number of students that will eventually register. All of our families do not register in the week in March. We do have, in fact, last year we had a registration 3 days before school started. So that number will change and it will go up. I do believe, looking at the past history of probably around 4 to 5 years, it would somewhere be around 20 to 25%. So if we calculate that, even at the lowest number, it's an additional 20 students, so we may reach 120 half-day kindergartners. And right now, we have 123 full-day kindergartners. Now, the process that we're going through is this. We have identified those families who submitted their interest and payment, and we then calculated exactly where we were at. We far exceeded, in fact, we exceeded the 100 number at the point we looked at it by about 37. So then we began to say, what other sections could possibly be created? And we've talked about this previously, and later on in under my report, I'm going to have the recommendation to add, with your approval, at no additional cost to the district, a 5th full-day kindergarten program at Muraski Elementary School. We have the numbers to support that, and upon your approval, on Monday we will be sending out letters with statements to parents on their placement. That does create a fluid situation, however, in this regard. For example, if, as an example, Kinsner Elementary School has reached its maximum of 25 students, then any remaining students could be assigned to a different elementary school, in this case, potentially, let's say, Muraski. The parents then would be notified that their placement is Muraski, and then they have the option of either reducing their intent to the half-day program and remaining at their demographic school, Kinsner, or accepting the full-day placement at Muraski. So those numbers will tend to fluctuate very, very slightly. We won't know that until all of the letters are accepted and all the communications and final intent payment of $300 has been forwarded to us. Right now, if everything was exactly perfect to the numbers we have charted and where those students would attend, we would only have remaining 6 students on the waiting list, 6 families on the waiting list, and 5 students who are asking for early entry. And that's a process of testing. So they don't reach the 5 by September, and we have to make sure they're developmentally ready for kindergarten. And there's a process for that. So right now there would be 11 students total, including the students to be tested. If any parents then would drop out of the full-day commitment and choose a half-day commitment, then we would go to that waiting list and go from there. So it is going to be my recommendation in a little bit to go to a 5th section at Muraski. Any questions?
What are the special ed holds?
At our preschool, we have students who are moderate, intense students who may need a full-day kindergarten placement at either Sarar, those students of special education at Sarar or Chapman. What we found out last year in our initial full-day program was that we over-calculated the number of openings we had as opposed to the number of students who then are IEP-driven to attend a full-day program that we must provide. So we're making sure that we have those students we believe who will be identified will have a place in those particular 2 buildings. That's the reason for that.
Okay, and if they don't pan out, then you go to the alternate list? and
That
put
is correct.
somebody in. Okay,
That
thank
is
you.
correct.
And if they're going to a different school than their home school, transportation is provided by the
Absolutely.
district, correct?
We
Okay.
provide that transportation because we're making the decision based on enrollment to provide a program for them at a different school.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about kindergarten at this time? Thank you.
I do have one question,
Yes.
but it's gonna have to wait for Deb to get back. I was wondering how we did at collecting the fees that we charged last year. In this year's, this being our first year,
You're talking about the full-day
the
program?
full-day program, yeah.
I believe there was a high, I think we collected them all. I don't
It was
Yeah,
recall.
100%.
okay.
It was 100%.
Okay, good. Okay,
Otherwise, we would have made that note,
yeah.
that's for sure.
Carl, I do remember, and I don't know any of the specifics, but we did discuss, if for some reason those fees aren't paid, it would be addressed at the half-year
Yes.
point. And
Yes.
if
I just wanna make sure that we did. That was
Correct.
whatever my question was. Did we? I knew we had some issues at one point. I just wanna make sure we addressed them and.
That was taken care of.
Cool.
Under revised 2015-16 academic calendar, as we've all spoken to previously, this academic calendar is unique for our district, mainly because we are beginning school a little bit earlier than we usually do. We oftentimes begin around the 19th or 20th of August. And in this calendar, we're actually beginning our convocation on August 10th with the first day of school for grades 1 through 9 on August 12th. So that's about a week earlier. The reason for that is at the end of this calendar, our final day of school is May 20th. And we've spoken previously about the importance of making sure that we have adequate time to prepare for the opening of the new middle school, and that's the reason for that. That will give us more time to prepare, make sure everything's ready, everything has been checked, and we're ready to go. So, wanted to make sure that that's well aware. We'll be posting this once after the board approves it. That approval will take place on our next board meeting. I believe it's on the 23rd this month because of that change. Some other unique sections of this calendar. We're flip-flopping the convocation and the professional development day. We've always had professional development first, convocation second. Next year, we're going to have convocation first. So that's the 10th and the 11th. You'll also see a number of late arrival or early release days. We have struggled to find enough time for teachers to collaborate, especially in teacher-based teams, and to provide professional development and be able to assess and analyze those assessments. Mrs. Green will be talking about testing and assessment in a little bit, but that's important. Data is important. Analysis of that data is important. We need to provide time to do that so it drives instruction. So those are key changes to the calendar. And Cameron, do you want to speak about anything else in regard to early and the late arrival, early dismissal?
The only thing I would add is, in years past, we had waiver days, where we would take a full day of professional development. And what we're looking at is, as we've made significant improvements with our professional development initiatives, it's now better used to spread that time throughout the school year. So that's what we're looking at. A late arrival or early release would just be an hour difference. And if approved, we will send that clear communication home to parents so they can plan. So, our elementary day, typically students are leaving at 3:30, they would leave at 2:30 on those days. Or if they would arrive to school at 9 o'clock, they would arrive to school at 10 o'clock. And that gives us additional time to work across the district. One of the challenges we have right now with our ability to meet internally is it's also important to meet across the district. So opportunities for all fourth grade teachers to get together. Or for example, our encore classes, our PE teachers or orchestra teachers or other teachers that just are one per building have difficulties getting together to meet. So this gives us opportunities throughout the year. And as you can see, they're strategically placed towards the end of our quarters to have that opportunity to look at how our students are progressing to meet the expectations of courses at those key times. And again, that will give us the flexibility to continue to develop our program for our students.
I have a question. Cameron, is there a preference among the teachers for early release or late start?
This is the first time we've done this in a lot of years, and really what we try to do is balance them. Instead of a preference, is just try to balance them for parents.
Well, that's my thought, is for the parents, like maybe in the morning, having kids at 10 o'clock would be tough for somebody who's trying to get to work.
Yeah, what we've looked at is balancing, there's about half late arrival, half early release. And that's something we're continuing to look at. For example, before breaks, we've done an early release. Parents can, that made sense before spring break, there's gonna be an early release day. And so we've tried to balance the days and the times, and also look at, for example, our half-day kindergarten program. We don't want the afternoon to always lose an hour, and we wanted to spread that wealth in terms of classes and schedules. So we looked at doing a balance, and I think, our plan is to see the feedback of how it goes next year, and if there's concerns. We don't see this as a long-term plan. What we see it as is we needed to do the waiver days. We did the waiver days until a time where we have enough professional development already built in for full days that we don't need another full day of waiver day. We need this time to continue to work in our teacher-based teams, and that may be a year or two that we're going to need to do late arrivals or early starts. But after that, we've got to evaluate it like we have now. But the plan is to try a mix, try on different days, and then get some feedback and fine-tune when we look at the 16-17
You
calendar.
may want to use that new database of email addresses we have for the parents and maybe canvass them to see if there's a preference among them, because I think that's our biggest shortcoming for the parents. Getting them to class or, picking them up after might be easier. I don't know. But
We can do that.
So late arrival days, what time will that?
It's an hour later than the start time, so it would be 8:25 for the high school, 9 o'clock for the middle school, and 10 o'clock for the elementaries.
And same on the
And the
other.
preschool would be 8:25.
10 o'clock's tough for little kids if somebody has to work.
Yeah.
Is this gonna jeopardize the hours of instruction for kindergarten, like we just went through having all the blizzard bags, or, now are we
We're
have
going
any?
to address that with the change within the actual day by adding a certain number of minutes that will alleviate that problem.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Next.
So that will be on the next board agenda for approval. Under curriculum and talent development, we have a testing presentation. Aaron, our Director of Curriculum and Talent Development.
Thank you for this opportunity to present this evening on this very important topic. I think it's fair to say when we hear the word testing in education these days, it evokes somewhat of a negative connotation. I don't think that's always been the case. If you think back, I think most of us in this room, as we were in school, we had probably weekly spelling tests on Fridays. Every couple weeks, maybe a chapter test in science or math. That was really about it. I don't think I took my first high-stakes standardized test until high school with the ACT. However, things are very different now. Our kindergartners, as they come in, and not to even mention in preschool, they're actually being tested, but as our kindergartners come into school on the first day, they are being assessed. And these are things that I'm going to talk about why we're doing this. It's a state requirement. So they have a 63-question assessment that kindergartners need to be assessed on in order to see where they are developmentally and see if they come into the schools ready. So today, what I'm going to talk to you about is testing in Ohio schools, specifically in Strongsville, of course, and then explain what testing currently looks like in our school district, why we have this abundance of testing, and what's the likelihood of this getting some sort of a break in the near future or a reduction in testing. So like I said, testing is definitely one of the hottest issues, not just in Strongsville, not just in Ohio, but across the nation. Anything you read, there is an influx of concern on testing and what we're doing to our kids and what we're using the data for. So as this slide says, testing is not all bad in and of itself. Testing has a place and a purpose. Assessments, we will have those forever in our world. So beyond the school day, we take an assessment or a test at the optometrist. You have an eye exam. If you turn driving age, you take a driving test. If you want a government job, you may take a civil service test. And really the point of all that is to assess where you are in relation to some criteria. So when you go to the eye doctor, can you read the smallest line? That's going to tell you your need for corrective lenses. Same with, can you safely operate a vehicle, abiding by the rules? That's going to determine the criteria of should you be granted a license. So like I said, in and of itself, testing is not a bad thing. However, it's become very prevalent today. We collectively being parents, teachers, schools, and districts, use testing data for instruction, to design it, to inform it, to change what we're doing, to determine what students know and where they are with things. So maybe on that Friday spelling test, you may have had a Thursday pre-test, so you knew which words you had to go home and practice. District performance overall, I've talked about that before, as far as if we're an A district or where we are with our PI. And also to measure teacher effectiveness, and this is one of the relatively new pieces of legislation. So I'll briefly go into 4 types of tests. I won't spend a ton of time on it, but just so you realize that there are different tests for different purposes, and that's why we have to give some of these different opportunities. The first one, teacher tests. This is what we all know. This is where we get grades. It may be an assessment that you have in science class over cells. All of us are familiar with this. It is directly linked to whatever content you're learning in class. We have district tests. These are tests that we give across the district or across grade levels, really to kind of gauge where we are. So it's not quite as arbitrary of, if I have an A in Miss Jones's room, what does that look like in Miss Smith's room? Are those synonymous? So we do things that are across grade level. In Strongsville, we do things like common assessments. So what that helps us do, if there are 10 sections of biology and they all give the same assessment, we can see where the kids are. So it doesn't matter who's teaching it. It's the same content. We can get a great gauge of who's learning the information, who needs retaught, and what we need to do to drive instruction. We also use AIMSweb, grades K through 6, and what that is a program in which we can assess where students are in reading and math. And if they have deficiencies, we can monitor that, we can intervene. So it's really a diagnostic assessment. And then, of course, the midterms and the finals. Then we have district tests that are state requirements. So basically, the state has put out a requirement saying, we need this information. There are certain ways in which you can give it to us. These are your district tests. So you have a little bit of choice from their designated list as to what you can use for these. In Strongsville, we do use the AIMSweb testing. So we attempt to use the same test for multiple purposes as much as we can. We have to report in grades K through 3 where our kids are with reading, math, and writing. and those are our diagnostics. We put that into our EMIS, the state gets that information, and that's actually one of our indicators on the report card. How are our kids growing year to year? SLOs, I know that is a newer one, came into existence last year in our district. And what those do is determine teacher growth. So how much effect is a teacher theoretically having on students in the classroom? The reason we do this is state mandate. We have to show how a teacher is affecting learning and growth. In subjects, in grade levels where there aren't standardized tests, example, instrumental music or health, they're not taking an OAA or a PARCC test. So we need some way to show, okay, my kids came in at this level, I taught them for a year and they're leaving at this level. That becomes half of a teacher's evaluation. So that's the reason that we do these SLOs at the beginning of the year and then again toward the end of the year to hopefully show growth. Additionally, it's a state mandate that we assess for gifted, we screen for gifted. We do that in grades 2 and 6, and that's a whole grade screening, and we use the COGAT and the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. So as you can already hear, these are piling up. You're hearing lots of different test names. That is where we're headed with this. And we haven't even gotten into the big one, which are the state mandated tests. So these are the ones in which we have no choice. We are required to give them. They used to be proficiencies. When I started teaching 4th grade, it was the 4th grade proficiency. Then it became the Ohio Achievement Assessments, the OAAs and the OGTs. As we know, this year it has transitioned into the PARCC exams, or next generation assessments. The reason they are PARCC exams is just for language and math. Those are where we do the Common Core standards, the only 2 subjects. So PARCC tests are really just math and language arts. The other 2, the science and social studies, we use what are called next generation assessments. Very similar, but developed by the state of Ohio, because Ohio has their own standards for science and social studies. And as I already mentioned, kindergarten has the KRA. That is that 63 question assessment. The kids don't sit and take it. The teacher actually assesses them as they're playing, as they're learning, just to see where they are. So again, all of these are not optional. We must, by law, give these assessments as well. And results, this is how we are held accountable, both as a district, teachers individually, and then we look at data from the kids as well. Moving on, this is incredibly small, but this is the testing schedule that we produced for this year in Strongsville City Schools. And this has been on the website all year, multiple copies. You can find them on the curriculum website and the testing just on the Strongsville City Schools webpage. However, you can see the plethora of tests that are there. Honestly, all of those are needed. So we're not putting in there anything that is over and above. The ACT could be considered optional. You know, it really isn't in this day and age in this district, but that is one of the few things that kids would potentially not take on there. The rest, as I said, those are either state mandated or district mandated to meet a state requirement. So, Ohio has recognized and has heard lots of testimony. Lots of superintendents and parents have expressed their discontent over all of this testing that's going on. And so ODE put together at the end of last year a report on assessment to kind of chart where we are in Ohio with testing and assessment. As you can see, this came out in just January of this year. The chart shows average number of hours spent per grade level, grades K through 12. So rather small, but the average between grades K and 12 is 19.8 hours of testing. That's not including test prep. That is not including any tests that a teacher may give their kids in science or in social studies. So that is state tests, that's district tests, things that we need to give. And here it is again, broken down a little bit further. District tests, the ones I mentioned, the tests for the state requirements, and then the state tests. Again, averaging about 19.8 hours, some higher, some lower. Additionally, we spend a lot of time preparing for tests. We want to make sure that the kids can actually show what they know. So it's not as if we're teaching to a test, but we want to make sure when a student has a test in front of them, they know how to answer the questions. They know what they're supposed to respond to. They know what the format looks like. So the review, the practice, the preparation for all of that averages, and this is across the state, approximately 15 hours per year per classroom. So that's in addition to the testing. I'll go quickly through this, but the PARCC assessments that we've had this year, we've had part 1 already, and that first part is what's called a PBA, or the performance-based assessment. So for language arts and math, these are 2-part tests. The first part we did in February into early March, and this is more of your show what you know in a longer fashion. So students may have to write, they may have to compare 2 texts, they may have to solve math problems and show their work and explain how they got it, or do a multiple part answer. These are the assessments that can't be graded by a computer. So that's why they are given earlier in the year, so that people at the state level can take them, they can grade them, and get that data back in a reasonable amount of time. The tests that we have coming up shortly are the end of year assessments. They are to be administered approximately after 90% of instruction, and this is supposed to be your easier to grade, computer graded, short answer, multiple choice, those type of questions. So it should be a quicker turnaround, theoretically almost instantaneous when we get to testing on the computer. This year in Strongsville, we did all paper and pencil testing. We were not in a place where we could forge at that point into doing computer testing. Next year, at this point, it's not optional to do paper and pencil, so we will be doing all testing online. Here is a quick view of test time. This is PARCC again, and you can see the units. So this is grades 3, 4, and 5. Part 1, the red part, are the time slots that we are supposed to allot for each part of the test. Part 2, that's your end of year. So I'll go into the next grade level and show you an example. If you look at grades 6 through 8 in language arts, you will see the first part, we had to give a 75-minute session, a 90-minute session, and a 60-minute session. So 3 separate days for language arts. And then we had math, 2 days of math for 60-minute sessions. I'm sorry, down here, 280 and 70. These are your end of year times. So you count all those minutes up, and of course it's going to be adding up. That is not even your science and social studies, this is solely the PARCC. Why does it matter? We are now using these PARCC assessments, or end of year exams, as part of 2018 and beyond graduation requirements. So as it stands today, students need to score X number of points. It's looking like 17 or 18 points on these exams in order to graduate from high school. So there are levels they will score. They take the PBA part, the performance part, the end of course part, or the end of year part, combine them, and students get a score, 1 through 5. From that, they have to have enough points as one of their ways, one of their pathways in which they can graduate from high school. So it does become a high-stakes exam. This is from the testing report. There is a lot here, but this is with no changes, kind of what we had this year and what we'll continue to see if there are absolutely no changes in test time. So it's similar, it's just broken down a little bit further by grade level, district testing time, state testing time, total hours. And the average here, the 19.8, that's what I already referenced. If nothing changes in the future, kids will potentially approximately spend 20 hours just in the actual test taking. Thankfully, the superintendent of Ohio Public Education, Dr. Ross, as I said, he's been listening to feedback. He's been working to address some of this over-testing. He does realize that it has become over-testing, overbearing for the students. So in this report that he published in January, he made some recommendations. He proposed these to Governor Kasich and General Assembly. So these aren't necessarily done deals yet, but these are recommendations that he made for our students. Limiting the amount of time that a student takes to 2% of the school year, and the time that you could spend practicing to 1% of the school year. With the third grade, we have the third grade reading guarantee. And his proposal is eliminating giving that in the fall, but doing a spring and a summer administration of tests for those who need it. Additionally, we give math, writing, and reading diagnostic tests to kids in grades K, 1, 2, and 3. He is proposing eliminating those and just doing the reading in 1st through 3rd. Eliminating those student learning objectives, those SLO tests that teachers give to show growth. And what he is proposing in grades pre-K through 3 and teachers in non-core areas 4 through 12, we would use shared attribution, which is basically you look at how the district did overall in growth for the tested grades, and then you all share that wealth. So if they made a year's worth of growth, everybody in the district makes that year's worth of growth. And all in all, the recommended changes could reduce the time students spend taking tests by nearly 20%. This would be his proposed, if it goes through, would be about 16.2 hours per year on testing, which is a little bit less than 19.8. If you do see the kindergarten, the lower grade levels significantly drop. So from 11 hours in kindergarten down to 5.1 in the proposed recommendation. A quick note on opting out, because for a while that was a huge question and concern. Opting out of these assessments, the PARCC assessments and the state assessments, it won't cause the district to lose funding. It won't necessarily hurt your child's classroom grades or promotion status. So there's been legislation recently that has addressed all of this. It will, however, hurt the district report card that we get from the state, and it will affect the performance index as well. So where districts that have plentiful opt-outs may see lower scores on their PI. Again, the performance index tells how well students do on the state tests, and the AMO, or the annual measurable objectives, they track specific subgroups. So how did the students with limited English proficiency do from one year to the next? So if students opt out, what it does for the teacher, it just kind of wipes them off of the slate. So they don't get a 0 for that kid's test. It's like they don't exist. Districts can look better. Districts can look lower if you have your better kids opting out, because you're not going to have those high achievers to pull the scores up. As I mentioned there, the PI, or the performance index, that is affected no matter what, because they look at how many kids scored proficient. And additionally, teachers are evaluated partly on their student test scores. Again, if the student doesn't take the test, it's not included in the teacher's evaluation, so it's not going to hurt it. However, you need to have at least 95% participation, or else your state funding could be affected. Newly passed legislation, House Bill 7, this is good news. It basically is called safe harbor. So schools can't hold students accountable. They can't, any score that they get on a test, they can't use that against them for this year of the PARCC implementation. So we can't use them to retain the student or not promote them. And we also can't release individual student scores to anyone other than the district or the school or the parent. Additionally,
Aaron, can I ask you?
Sure.
Why is that? I mean,
Which part? The release of the information?
What's the concern? I don't know, I guess.
Well, I think my thought process is it's not going to be a terribly accurate reflection, is the fear, because it's a brand new test over new content. And so I don't know specifically. I mean, we can't release test names and student names anyhow because
Right.
of FERPA. I don't know if it's just so that we don't look as bad as the test scores may show, because they will be, I'm guessing, somewhat lower based on the test format, based on the depth and the rigor that the questions assessed. And continuing on, students can take an end-of-course exam later in their career, so it's not just a one-and-done shot. If they don't do well this year in freshman English, they can retake it at a later time. And we'll still get our accountability measures. We'll still get our letter grades. However, we being the state of Ohio, districts won't face sanctions or penalties if our scores are really low this year, as traditionally would happen. What's helpful, Dr. Ross recently issued a letter assuring districts they would continue to receive state funding, even for students who don't participate in these new tests. That wasn't going to be the case. So anyone that's opted out will still continue to receive the funding. We have a waiver for this year to permit ODE to fund the student for the following year. However, districts have to be cautious. If we don't have at least 95% of students taking the test through federal No Child Left Behind, there could be consequences. So then I just put some state contacts up there, Representatives, Senator, and Dr. Richard Ross. Be glad to take questions, comments.
On the math portion of those tests, to Carl's point, and correct me if this is a misunderstanding I have, but isn't our current elementary math curriculum not necessarily in line with what the PARCC was testing? So perhaps that would affect the scores on the tests, and you don't want to penalize the kids if the curriculum's not totally in alignment with the test?
Somewhat.
Okay.
We worked diligently to ensure
To
that we
overcome
could
that.
supplement,
Right.
because of the program we were using. There were some holes and gaps. However, we mapped it out as a grade level. We looked at what we needed to supplement to address it.
But this way we won't be harmed, or the student
Correct.
won't be harmed, it won't impact them?
Correct.
Okay.
Other thoughts, questions? Okay.
Thank you,
are
Erin.
welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. At this time, I have analyzed what is really round one of the testing. Erin talked about the performance-based assessments. We have yet to give the end-of-course exams. And I'd like to make a statement about this. Accountability is important to all organizations, and public school districts must also be accountable. But what is the proper and effective use of student assessment is the key. Each day, teachers are assessing students in our district across the district. These assessments give feedback on student achievement, check for student understanding, and provide data to inform instruction. As Mrs. Green has just shown, the mandated statewide assessments are the accountability tool currently being used. There are these performance-based assessments and end-of-course exams. There are these high-stakes tests and assessments now driving instruction, but are they driving instruction and learning environments in our schools? We certainly hope not. These PARCC, English, Language Arts, and Math, or next-generation assessments, science and social studies, do not directly support the efforts of our teachers to provide challenging, creative, engaging learning opportunities for students. Do we foster well-rounded, engaged students under the current testing conditions? Students who love learning and are taught to seek out knowledge, to solve problems, or marshal intelligent arguments? Personally, I think not. Student achievement is our #1 objective. It is not to train students how to take tests and to survive the onslaught of high-stakes testing. We must prepare our students to be college or career ready. by being engaged in problem-based learning, by being able to collaborate, dialogue, and provide evidence to support their rationales, and be able to communicate their learning through writing, presentations, portfolios, and proposals. Thus far, the concerns in regard to excessive testing have been addressed by creating limits on testing in its totality. That potentially may result in reducing meaningful common assessments our district uses that support the ongoing learning needs of students through differentiated classroom instruction. We use assessments to progress monitor. We use assessments to provide and direct instruction, enrichment, and support. Therefore, in providing relief in testing, we cannot merely focus on reducing testing time, but on the effectiveness of testing that drives instruction and improves student learning. We spent hours, as Mrs. Green mentioned, preparing for statewide testing. What we lose is precious instructional opportunities, and we add unproductive stressors to the learning environment. We also incur costs to meet the requirements and to support this testing. Ultimately, is a good education about testing, or is it truly about a love for learning, having the skills to seek out answers to complex problems, and much, much more? Lifelong learners, in whatever career our students choose, is a critical trait for themselves and ultimately our nation. I implore our legislators and the Ohio Department of Education to continue to analyze testing in our schools. Our students are the future leaders of this state and our country. Next, we'll move on.
Thanks, John. Okay.
Under service agreement, under curriculum and talent development, we have a service agreement for McKeon Educational Group for a part-time Title I instructor to service pupils attending St. Joseph and John Interparochial School under Title I federal funding administered to approved non-public schools by local districts, as in Exhibit 8. Also, we have a Strongsville High School French students a trip to France. The trip will take place upon board approval, June 13th through the 22nd, 2016. Expenses associated with the trip will be paid by participating students. And a very important caveat, if necessary, the trip may be postponed or the destination changed depending on world events at the time. We also have a Strongsville High School Spanish students trip to Spain. The trip will take place June 13th through the 24th, 2016. Again, expenses paid by participating students. And again, the trip may be postponed depending on world events at the time. And finally, we have summer school dates for the 2014-15 summer school. Elementary summer school, June 8th through the 26th, and secondary summer school, June 8th to July 15th. Any questions under curriculum and talent development?
Nope.
It's my privilege then to ask Mr. Riva under Human Resources for our recommendations. Mr. Riva.
I will go to the podium. And Mr. Dietrich, if we could go out of order a little bit. Mr. Dietrich, if you want to come over with me. It's an exciting evening for our district. Over the last few weeks, we've set a future path for where we're going. And it's been my privilege to accept last week the honor of being the next superintendent of this district, and also begin to look at our team for the future. And as we met through the interview process, and I shared the vision that I had for the future of this district, a big part of that future was putting the right people in the right positions. And that starts tonight with these recommendations. Starting in November, December, John and I met with every building level administrator in the district. And we talked about what value they brought to our district, where did they think we needed to go as a district, and how can they help us lead the way. And Mr. Dietrich, here with me tonight, is one of those that has a clear vision for the future. And what he's been able to demonstrate thus far in a short time in Strongsville is strong leadership skills that have a vision for the future and a vision for middle level education. So it's my privilege here tonight to share with you the recommendation of Steve Dietrich as the next principal at Center Middle School. As I think it was just about a year and a half ago that I introduced him as the assistant principal at the high school, but just as a reminder, he was a science teacher for 11 years with Akron Public Schools, 5 years as an assistant principal at Barberton High School, and he spent the last 2 years as a Strongsville High School assistant principal. And as I said, as we met with Steve, it was clear that he has a vision for the future, a passion for middle-level education, and he can continue the culture of excellence that has been at Center Middle School under Jenny's tenure. Also, he comes to us with experience of consolidating middle schools in his past experiences at Barberton. And his understanding of that process and what went well in Barberton and what maybe we can improve upon will be instrumental as we look at consolidating our middle schools next year. We want a long-term vision for the success of our middle schools, and that is why I will also announce tonight that if approved, Steve will not only take over as the principal of Center Middle School for the 2015-16 school year, but is my recommendation to be the principal of our new Strongsville Middle School starting in 2016-17. So with that, I would like to share with you my recommendation of Steve Dietrich.
Hey, we want to see you. You got to shake our hand.
Thank you very much.
Well, yes, we'll miss you at the high school.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you.
There you go, Steve.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Don't worry, we'll have that on video for years to come, Steve. Mrs. Pelko. You know, I spent the afternoon over at Center Middle School sharing with the staff before tonight the recommendation that was going to be made here. And it was not an easy meeting, I don't think, for Jenny or her staff, because when you have greatness in your midst, you don't want to let that go as a staff. There were a lot of tears shed, but what I look at is our future of our district. And taking what Jenny has been able to build at Center Middle School, the culture she's been able to build, her relationships with people, her ability to engage people, to move them forward, to improve her building in our district under her leadership, and to take that to a district level is for the benefit of all. And I think the staff at Center Middle School, although sad to see her leave, also understands that it's for the greater good of our students and our district. So it's my privilege to share with you the recommendation of Jenny Pelko as our next Assistant Superintendent for Strongsville City Schools. Jenny is a product of our school district. She graduated from Strongsville High School. We don't want to give the year, do we? She taught Spanish at the high school for 11 years and has been at Center for the past 8 years as an assistant principal and principal. I had the privilege of working with Jenny in those first administrative experiences, and to see the leader she has become at Center and for our district makes me extremely proud and extremely happy for our future. As I said, her skills in fostering a positive culture, of building meaningful relationships with students, staff, parents, and the community, and the support of her tireless work and initiatives, it drives everyone towards excellence. In her new role, as I said, she'll be able to take the talents to a whole new level. We're building a team for the future. We're getting the right people in the right positions, and our future is bright as we look forward to working with Steve and Jenny in their new roles and the rest of our administrative team, teachers, staff, and parents on our quest to excellence. So I'd like to congratulate Jenny. I'd also like to recognize her family that's here tonight, her husband Bill, her son Braden, her daughter Avery, and she has a son Kason, but he had better things to do tonight. He's at a Cavs game, so board meeting, Cavs game. I think
Couldn't we have had the meeting at the game?
Yeah. So please help me in recognizing our recommendation as our next Assistant Superintendent, Jenny Palco.
And yes, it begins.
And Mr. Naso, the last thing before we conclude those recommendations, if we can make a change to Jenny's title. We are actually going to change her title from Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and Staff Development to just Assistant Superintendent. As we look at a new administrative team and new administrative roles and responsibilities, that gives us flexibility in terms of our responsibilities. So I'd appreciate if we could strike that from the agenda.
And will we be backing her down to a step 7 then? Oh, no, okay, sorry. Thank you, Cameron. Congratulations, Stephen, Jenny. I mean, we're building one heck of a team. It's been one heck of a week for our district with all the things that are going on, but I'm excited to see everything that we've got. And Cameron, one of the reasons we picked you is because we knew that you would build a great team around yourself, and you've done that, and you've hired and done a tremendous job with that, and of course with John's guidance. But we knew that you'd build a great team, so your recommendations here are spot on, and we are really excited. And Stephen, we are turning over a brand new, state-of-the-art, the best building in the state to you. So rest up.
Don't mess it up.
Don't mess it up. You know? As they say, don't mess this up. Now we have all the confidence in the world in you, and we're so excited. And I imagine they're very sad at center today, but excited for Stephen to take it over, and it's going to be great. Nice team, Cameron. Excellent job.
There's no doubt, Mr. Naso, that using a cliche from an all-state commercial, Strongsville City Schools are in good hands with Ryba and Palco.
I think so.
We have
right.
one timely piece of information, and that is the recommendation to be voted upon on our addendum. It's under the first full-day kindergarten 5th session. Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the 5th section of full-day kindergarten be added to the 2015-16 school year. And again, that would be at Moraski Elementary School. So we need a vote.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Richard.
Mine's almost over.
Last one.
Last one, oh my goodness. Any discussion? Nope. Amy, could you take?
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Thank you so
Motion
much, and
passes.
thank you for all that you do as board members in support of our students' education. This is a great example of that. Full-day kindergarten is a great start for kids.
Excellent.
That concludes my recommendations and report, Mr. Naso.
Thank you, John. That brings us to the consent calendar. All the items marked by an asterisk are voted upon with one vote. There is the modification to item C1 in Jenny Palco's title. That's the only modification to the agenda that we have. So if we note that, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Duke. Thank you, Richard. Any discussion? Have a vote? Amy,
Mr.
please.
Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes. Motion carries. Excellent. That brings us to Board of Education Other.
One little thing, if I could, before Richard was getting it. I just want to echo, first of all, commend you on the eloquence of your statement about testing. I thought you put it very well.
Thank you.
And testing for the sake of testing is just plain dumb. So I hope our legislators will pay attention to what the parents are saying, to what the educators are saying, and we get back to what worked for most of us to get us to be successful adults and give our kids the instructional time that they need versus sitting in there preparing for tests every other day. So I echo what you said. I commend you for that. And I would suggest that you put that in a letter format and send it off to Dr. Ross and to our 2 representatives, if not the governor.
I'll be happy to do that. Thank you.
Richard?
And I just wanted to update the community. We did the Ohio Means Education website that we talked about at the last board meeting. And as of, I think I checked at 5:30 before I came here. We had 226 people sign up, so I'm going to start updating the website with the names. We'll put a counter on it. OhioMeansEducation.com. We want to have more names to sign up. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And I just want to point out what one heck of a week we've had. We have a new superintendent in Cameron. We've got a new assistant superintendent in Jenny. We've got our principal now for our new middle school in Stephen. We presented our case to the legislation. We've got a new agreement with the SEA. I mean, this has been one heck of a week. And it is the culmination of a lot of effort over a long period of time, and it's all coming together. So I applaud our district. We are moving forward, all good things. It's just great. So with that, I'll end that speech. We do have need for executive session. It will be capped at 5 minutes. It is on negotiations, because we're going to be out here by 8 o'clock. So do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Duke. Thank you, Richard. Amy, could you take?
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes. All right, we're going to go into executive session at 8:55, which is exactly now. 7:55, excuse me, if I can tell time. And we will leave, and we won't resume business, and we'll be in our cars at 8:01. Thank you very much.
Happy Easter.
Happy
Happy
Easter,
to everyone.
everybody.
Happy Easter.